Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience, and welcome to the webinar titled Google Search for Life Sciences Companies, presented by Perficient in collaboration with Google. My name is Eugene Stefanov, and I'm the Marketing Manager for Perficient's Life Sciences practice. Before I turn it over to our presenters, I'd like to cover some basic housekeeping items and then provide a brief overview of Perficient. So all participants on this call will be in a listen-only mode. This means that everyone is on mute. You are, however, welcome to submit questions to the speakers at any time today. Just type them in the chat feature, which is located on the left side of your screen. Please do make sure you state your questions clearly, and keep in mind that other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. But do keep in mind that your questions will be addressed anonymously as time allows towards the end of the presentation. If you still have unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information about the services or products that we're talking about, feel free to fill out one of the contact forms found on proficient.com. Also worth mentioning, today's webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you within several days along with the link to the slides. All right, now that we've covered the logistics, let's move on for a quick overview of Perficient. So we are an IT consulting company that offers a whole host of IT solutions for a variety of industries. Of course, life sciences, healthcare, financial services, consumer products, and a couple of others. The organization has employees and offices all around the world, including the many locations you see here on this slide. And as you may expect, many of our clients are based in North America, Europe, Asia, and so forth. Next slide talks a little bit about Perficient. Here are some facts. We were founded in 1997. We are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And at the moment, we are at about 2,600 employees. So Perficient offers its clients many different types of business and technology solutions, all the way from business process management and information management systems, all the way to content management systems and portals. The services that we provide are what you would typically find in an IT services company. That's consulting, implementations, upgrades, cloud hosting, application support, project management, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to life sciences specific IT applications, we cover the data management and EDC space, safety and pharmacovigilance, clinical trial management, data warehousing, as well as analytics and precision medicine. That said, we offer a bunch of services that relate to many other areas inside a typical life sciences company. All right, now that I've covered Perficient, let's move on to our presenters. On Google's side, we have Rob Cox, who is the head of search in North America for the company's Google for Work division. Since joining Google, Rob has helped the Google Search Appliance solution evolve tremendously and ultimately maintain its leadership position when it comes to enterprise search. We are extremely excited and lucky to have him here with us today to present. And from the Perficient corner, we have Chad Johnson, who is in charge of the company's Google practice. He's been with the company for over a dozen years and has an incredible amount of experience in implementing Google Search for a wide variety of companies and industries, as well as life sciences. Chad is also very well versed in the development and deployment of enterprise content solutions. And with that, I'd like to turn the call over to Google's Rob Cox.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate everybody allowing me to join this morning. Well, it's this morning here in California. Good day to you wherever you are. I'm excited to present to this group because Google and Perficient in partnership have had quite a lot of success in life sciences specifically, and we really believe that it's an area of business where we can have quite a large impact on how our customers interact with information, and more importantly, we can drive a whole lot of value in what they get. But before I get into life sciences specifically, I want to set the tone. I'm going on my fifth year here at Google, which in Google terms is quite a long time, and all of that time has been spent in this enterprise search world. And it's very interesting to me as I've gotten into it and worked with clients that search is one of these things, search inside of a company is one of these things that our customers don't intuitively get, right? Left to their own devices, we struggle with customers coming up with one of two use cases. Either what they do is they come up with HR, corporate communications, and IT information that they'll loosely call an intranet. This is something that's available to everybody. And they'll say, well, we want to search that stuff. And we'll say, okay. Or marketing has a pile of information that they've accumulated, and they want to go to the website and put a search box up in the upper right-hand corner of that website and make that information searchable. Those are generally the two use cases that, left to their own devices, clients or prospects come up with. The fundamental problem of both of those use cases is the CFO doesn't really want to pay for either one. So as we work with clients, one of the things we look to do is to figure out how we can drive that much greater value. And one of the stories that I like to tell as we're talking about this is I like to talk about Astro Teller. So up until Google's most recent reorganization announcement, where we became a part of a broader holding company called Alphabet, Astro was our captain of moonshots, meaning he ran our Google X division. This is the division that's most focused on things that we can work on and change the world. And I'm conscious, for those of you who may have an HBO subscription, that when I say moonshots, Silicon Valley, the show, has kind of taken a lot of my air out of that. But this is legitimately what we're doing, and we're thinking about how we can go really change the world. And Astro's thought, or Astro's, he would say this is true, is that it's actually easier to improve something by 10x than it is to improve something by 10%. And the analogy that he uses is he talks about a car. He says, imagine that you were given the task of getting 10% more fuel efficiency out of a car. Well, you tweak the way that the existing design works in order to go squeeze that much more efficiency out there. However, if somebody came to you and said, we need to get a car that goes 50 miles to the gallon here in the States, or metric wherever you may be for liters and kilometers, 50 miles to the gallon, or 500 miles to the gallon in a car, well, you'd have to start completely over in order to achieve that. And if you do start completely over, you get a different kind of feeling in the people that are working on it. You're building something from scratch. You're more mentally engaged as a leader. The people that you can attract to this type of a project are that much more interested because they believe that they're working on something that's important. And if you have a portfolio of these type of projects, because obviously there's risk that they'll fail, but if you have a portfolio of them, the returns can be that much greater. So as we think about this, I want you to think about search through the lens of trying to make something 10x better as opposed to simply making it 10% better. And I'll start with an example. So Perficient and Google share a joint client in Amgen. And in 2014, Amgen was significantly changing their business. The CEO had announced a restructuring, and that restructuring was really coming because there were a number of their drugs falling off of patent in 2015 and 2016, and so they knew that they needed to do things quite differently. So the restructuring came with a whole bunch of things you'd expect, cost cutting, that type of stuff. But it also announced a strategy that they were going to become far more acquisitive than they'd been in the past, bringing in additional companies. While they were going through this, we got a call from Hall Gregg, who runs the research and development, the IT portion of research and development at Amgen. And the challenge put before us was, how could we help with this acquisition strategy and make their business development people that much more impactful and effective? So we went out to Amgen and performed a series of workshops in which we went to go identify some areas where we could really help. And very quickly we honed in on the fact that as these acquired companies were coming in, the information that was associated with these acquired companies was getting lost. Amgen had a clear understanding of the major patents that they were acquiring, but they didn't know some of the other things that may have come with that company that were somewhere in the works, be it in the clinical trials process or some of the interesting early research or that type of thing, that they might be able to take advantage of that were paralleling some of their own internal development. So we turned the spotlight of search onto these acquired companies and onto really unearthing a lot of the things that they were getting from this. And this was all with Hall's guidance, and she really saw a win in this. We are in the process of going live with Amgen, Perficient, and Google are, and so we don't have a lot of the returns yet. But what we're expecting to have happen is we're expecting that there are going to be some surprises that come out of the portfolios of the acquired companies that are really going to be able to shorten their time to market and produce innovation that Amgen didn't anticipate when they were going in. That's the type of thing that we see or that we're seeking as we work with companies in life sciences. Let's switch gears a little bit here. I'd like to poll the audience just so we can get a sense for what we have out there. So the question is, do you have an enterprise search tool in place? Right? And the question is, do you have Google? Do you have some other platform that's in place? No, you don't have a solution, or the final one is you're unsure, which is quite typical. A lot of times what we see is companies actually have quite a few things out there, and so the notion of an enterprise search tool is not intuitive. So it looks like as the results are coming in here, we're seeing roughly half, maybe more than half, of folks are in the unsure bucket. And as we look, and then we're about split equally between, yes, there's about a quarter of folks that are Google, which is fantastic, a quarter that are some other platform, and a quarter of, no, we're looking for something to go fit that bill. Just keep going in case there's a couple more responses here. But yeah, so overall what we're looking at here is we've got about half of them are unsure whether there's a platform out there or not. About a quarter is Google, a quarter is some other platform, and about a quarter folks are looking for something else. Which of course my mathematics is off because you can't have 3/4 and a half. So maybe if I click on the, if we close this out and I do the results, we'll see if I get the percentage. There we go. So we got 40% is unsure, 24% is Google, 20% is some other platform, and then 18% is no, we're looking for a search solution. Let's do one more poll question, and then we'll get on to another reference. This one is, where do you see the most need for search in your company? Because again, I think there are several specific use cases within life sciences that make sense. So research and development, so it'd be that early research or sort of later stage. In the clinical trial operations, within the manufacturing part, within sales and marketing, or is there some other division that you see? And the reason that we set it up this way is oftentimes we see that focusing search on a discrete use case actually makes a difference. So as we're looking at this, it looks like the most popular that are coming in so far are research and development and sales and marketing. Clinical trial also represents, interestingly enough, manufacturing is not one that anybody seems to be looking for. The other one is interesting. Obviously, that one can be many different things. But let's skip to the results on this so that everybody can see. So what we see is we've got 25% is R&D, 16% or so is clinical trials. Oh, it's changing, 20%. There we go. Thank you. And then sales and marketing, we've got 24%. And then the biggest bucket by far is other. And so, you know, in subsequent discussions or what have you, if you guys could give us that feedback on that other and what's really driving pain within your company that you think might be able to be solved by search, that would clearly be interesting to us. I want to move on. Thank you for those who voted. And obviously, if you're watching on webinar, we couldn't record your vote, but thank you for voting mentally. I want to talk a little bit about Genentech. So Genentech has been a Google and Perficient client for quite some time, and they are one of the earlier adopters of search and figuring out how to use search within life sciences to great impact. Primarily what Genentech does with the technology is they use it for early research, and they use it for managing their clinical trials. So Genentech shows us a great example of how to use search in a targeted and specific fashion to achieve better business outcomes. And this is what we find is so critical as we think about search, is the idea of we need both a thrust, which is a business problem that we're off to go solve, and then a vector, which is focus in a certain workflow or a certain line of business. So to do that, we created this enterprise search value map, and we have these in a variety of different industries. This one is pharma, and it may not be perfect for your industry or your specific business, and that's okay. We work with individual clients on each of these. But the whole notion is, how do we go find value such that we can go fix some problems with enterprise search? And so as you can see, if you recall, I talked about the HR, corporate communications, and IT information, and that being the intranet. That's up here in the upper right-hand corner. And then the website search is over here in the upper left-hand corner is the intranet. Upper right-hand corner is the website. And as you go from top to bottom in this chart, the value increases. That's why those two are sitting at the top. But there are only three reasons why any organization would ever buy search. They are to become more operationally efficient, governance, risk, and compliance, or to develop business, sell the customer, service patients, that type of thing. And as you look at the operational efficiency bucket, what you can see as you go from top to bottom is we can impact, we can drive much more impact to a business as we go into the manufacturing process, into the clinical trials management process. I mean, part of the value that Genentech is driving is they never have to run a clinical trial again or any part of a clinical trial again. Even if there's a period of years that go between when they stepped off of working on a particular patent or drug or a molecule and then get back onto it, that period of years they can pick right back up and find all the information associated with that and continue moving forward. So they get much more value and much more mileage out of the information that they pay good money for. And then obviously the research process. Between all of the various steps between early research, late-stage research, and bringing a molecule to market, the number of people that may actually interact with this is huge. And so if that process of people handing off information can be seamless and various groups that may be working on parallel complementary things that have no idea about each other can unknowingly share information, the value can increase. We can speed up time to market in a radical fashion. On the right-hand side, we can help really understand the relationships that life sciences companies have with their key opinion leaders, right? Are there relationships that exist out in the universe with key opinion leaders that are non-intuitive? Do people who are somewhere on the research side actually have relationships with key opinion leaders, and the business development folks have no idea about them? We can unearth those type of things because we understand internal information as well as some of the other external information that we could bring to things like LinkedIn and that type of stuff. So my encouragement to you as you think about an enterprise search project is to think about this in terms of these workflows here. Work through what's associated with this workflow, deliver everything that's in one of these boxes, and then move on to the next one. And in my final slide, I'll talk about how we do that. So Google and Perficient work through a process of mutual evaluation is what we call it as we work with clients. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at the value map like the one we just showed and make sure it's right for whichever customer or client or prospect we're working with. But then once we think we've got it right, pick a couple of those boxes and host workshops with the various stakeholders from a line of business and IT perspective, individual contributor and junior executive, to understand how that workflow goes. And what we're specifically looking for is where are people doing their job, and then they have to stop and go look for something, and then they hop back on to the task that they were doing. Sometimes that process can take hours. Sometimes that process takes days. Sometimes that process can take weeks or months. But we want to understand that and understand where information or the lack thereof is actually slowing them down. And then we agree that we have a business problem that's worth solving. And once we do that, we will go build a prototype. And that prototype shows the business problem and how we would solve it, leveraging Google technology, focusing very much on an experience, a user experience that's familiar to the people that we've been interacting with. We don't want to give them something new. We want to show them how they can take their existing business process, the existing way that they work, and make that better. And we do that through a prototype. And then we roll up our sleeves and really go figure out what it's going to take to do the implementation. But this is the process that we follow, and we follow it each and every time. We followed it to great success, and it's a way to really link search to the business value that we can derive and something that's really important. So I'll conclude with, again, this notion of let's go pick something that's 10x. Let's go pick something that can have a real impact on your business and focus in on that in a laser-focused fashion and go figure out a plan to deliver that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad.
Thanks, Rob. This is Chad. I am the director and founder of the Google Search Appliance practice at Perficient. We've been a partner with Google for about 8 years now, and I've been involved in about it's approaching 250 implementations with our clients on the Google Search Appliance. So I've done a few of these. This is my actual desk back in Houston. I've been known to sort of eat and breathe the Google Search Appliance, as Rob might say. I'm going to tell you two stories today that Rob did a very good job of cheerleading the why. I'm going to talk a little bit about the how. The first story is about doing interesting things with enterprise search. We get asked a lot, isn't this just a keyword search? I'm searching through a bunch of documents. People ask me, how do I do something interesting with enterprise search, with the Google Appliance? How can I have it tell me something that I didn't know that I was looking for? How can it shorten the time that it takes me to find information? People think that doing interesting things involves a lot of advanced search where they have to fill out complicated forms to find what they're looking for. They think that it involves a lot of metadata tagging and a lot of curation of content. And so the first story that I'll tell is peeling the secrecy away a little bit and showing a technique that we use to surface what I would say is interesting and useful information with an enterprise search tool. And then the second half, I'm going to go just a little bit into the mechanics of what does it take to physically implement an enterprise search project with the Google Search Appliance. It will consider it sort of a 101 class. It won't tell you everything you need to know, but it'll at least kind of set a skeleton, a structure for what's involved. So I'm going to take you through a brief analogy with Google.com. We're probably familiar with a lot of these screenshots that I'll show, and so it will kind of set a foundation for the idea. So when Google started, it was 10 blue links on a page. It was very useful, but it was kind of monotone, kind of a one-ingredient recipe. And it took a little while. It's kind of ironic to think that it was about 7 or 8 years later until Google started adding a lot of filters and other options to the page. It kind of surprised me as I was going back and looking for these screenshots. But eventually Google added the ability to refine my search and to give me a little bit more contextual information about what I was seeing. And I could learn a little bit about my search from that information. If today Google almost interjects what it thinks I was looking for. If I'm searching for something that was probably a picture or probably a video, they're almost prioritizing those results instead of me having to manually go in and click shopping or video or images. But the contextual information started to help me piece together the information I was looking for. Go a little bit further in time, and Google starts adding local search results, shopping search results, things that were interjected into the middle of my search results. We may not even notice that it's doing it now. It's blended in quite nicely, but the overall idea is that Google started searching multiple content sources at once for me. I didn't even have to tell it that I was looking for pizza restaurants, although my search was about pizza restaurants here, but I didn't necessarily say I would like, Yelp or Zagat reviews and maps and locations, and they've started doing that for me. So we'll see a little bit of that analogy in the prototype that I'll show you in a second. The fourth step here that Google has done is taken my query and gone deep on it. They've added their knowledge graph and their knowledge cards, and they are not just showing me a list of search results anymore, even from multiple content sources. They're actually aggregating that content into a chunk of information and presenting it to me. They can do this by looking at what I searched for and kind of classifying it. If it's an object or a thing or a place, they can figure that out. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about how we can figure out not just some documents that contained the keywords that I searched for, but how can I actually show the user that I recognized what they searched for. And it's going to be a little bit of a trick, but I'll walk you through the process here in my prototype. So just to set the stage, I know it's hard to look at someone else's prototype and not know what I'm doing, so I'll give you a little bit of background. I set up a hypothetical scenario here where I work at a life sciences company and I have a collection of pharmaceuticals that I've indexed. Mine happen to be just some Wikipedia pages about these pharmaceuticals, nothing magical here. And I've set up a hypothetical example where I have started to search for an active ingredient, an agent in some of these pharmaceuticals. And I've emulated the 1998 10 search results from Google. This is helpful. It shows me which pharmaceuticals contain, has something to do with angiotensin, and I can click on them and I can go do my own research from here. But let me take you a little bit further with the analogy that I've set up before. So step 2, I can start to do some statistical analysis of these search results. In my example, again, this is somewhat hypothetical, I have programmed the Google Search Appliance to look for a list of 100 common symptoms. And anytime it sees those symptoms mentioned in the description of that pharmaceutical, it's tagging it. This is not manual tagging, although if your company has metadata that it has placed on the documents, you can use it. But for demonstration, I have had it simply look through the documents and see the occurrences of words like dizziness and nausea and anxiety, and I have roughly attributed those to these documents. This starts to give me a little bit more contextual information. It gives me a dimension that I didn't exactly, my search did not say what are the symptoms of pharmaceuticals that are angiotensins. I'm trying to get the search appliance to tell me something I didn't necessarily know I was looking for, but that it thinks is statistically interesting. So that's step 2. We're starting to go a little bit deeper into answering a question for the user and not just showing them a list of documents. Now let me go a little bit further. Step 3, we talked about how Google started to search multiple content sources. It started to show me local search results or shopping search results. I can do that within my enterprise. So in my hypothetical example, I have searched for angiotensin. Google Appliance has statistically determined that dizziness appears to be a common symptom. And without me even having to ask, it has gone through and searched my company's bulletin board, my forums, to see documents that mention both angiotensin and dizziness. And it has even used synonyms like drowsiness, and it's doing all of the nice Google magic, but it's doing it on my behalf. I didn't have to ask it to do this. And the thought process here with my somewhat contrived example is that why make the user go search a bunch of different places? Why make them search the drug database and the status of the clinical trials and the forums and other sources manually if I can start to make some correlations? So I've kind of dotted the lines here with these the red boxes that I've drawn around a couple of key things on the page. You can kind of see the thought process here, that the search application is starting to give me a cohesive picture of all the data that I have about angiotensins and things that cause symptoms. And the idea is that this could, while it may not directly answer my question, it could start to give me an avenue to go down to research what are the common side effects and what can I do about it? What have we done in the past? How have we dealt with that in the past? I'm trying to take search deeper. I'm trying to have it be a conversation and not just a very passive experience. The 4th step is very similar to the knowledge cards that we saw with Google. I did not search for olmesartan, but it did come up as the first search result for my search. So in the example a couple of slides ago, we saw how Google recognized that I was searching about the Statue of Liberty. It realized that the Statue of Liberty was a thing, and it showed me some details about that thing. We have the ability to do exactly the same thing in the Google Search Appliance. We can index things. We can index people. We can index places. And if, it doesn't even have to be the thing I searched for, but if one of those things comes up in my search results, the first search result is a very fine place to start. It's probably the one that I was looking for. We have the ability to kind of run a parallel search against that collection of things, our knowledge graph, kind of the equivalent of our knowledge graph. And we can give you as much information as we can fit on the page about that. This is very useful for things like expert search, where I start. I'll give kind of a parallel example in another industry. We had a company that was indexing call center case data. And people would call in with a bug number. Imagine you called your cable provider and you're seeing some weird error code on your TV or your cable box, and you type in that error code. At first, all they had indexed were the cases, the previous case history, and they were having to comb through it and try to figure out, oh my God, what did we do last time? How did we fix this? What does this error code mean? It was a lot of hunting and pecking for information. We realized that by using the statistics on the left-hand side, the dynamic navigation, we could see statistically which call center agents were handling the most number of cases related to that error code. And on the right-hand side, we could save the operator a step. We went ahead and pulled up some contact information for the person that appeared to statistically, again, this is a little bit of guesswork, but statistically resolve the most number of cases about this. I am sure that in your own companies you have similar information about who is doing what. I'm trying to present the idea of letting the search appliance help you collate that and not just know who did what, but who did the most of what, who is the most knowledgeable about, who has worked with this the most recently, and go one step further. I'm pushing you to think, don't just search a million documents in your file share. Present the user some interesting information about who did what. Present them some information about the thing that came up first in their search results. Show them a diagram, show them the person's face, show them their phone number or contact info if it's appropriate. We're trying to get to what I've set up the stage as interesting search information, interesting results. So in summary, the benefits of this multi-step search, this interesting search, is that I'm automatically searching multiple sources to make it easier for the user to find information. I don't have to be limited to one source per search. The second idea was that I can take information from one source and use it to power the search against another source. That was I can take something from my first search and use it to go search the forums or the knowledge base in parallel. So I can almost we get this problem all the time where people search for just one word up in the search box. I'm using some contextual information from that first search to do an even more targeted search on the second search. You might have noticed that I talked about this idea of recognizing the symptoms automatically by just looking through the documents. That's a noisy approach. It's not as accurate as hand tagging. But to my point at the beginning, I don't want to miss my child's recital because I've got to spend so much time doing manual tagging. So we do often use these automated tagging approaches, and they are not perfect, but they're decent. And when looked statistically, when looked at a whole, I may not have accurately tagged every single one of those pharmaceuticals as causing drowsiness, as causing dizziness. But statistically, it bubbled to the top, and therefore I purport that I can make some assumptions because of that. I'm squinting my eyes a little bit, and I'm drawing some conclusions from it. And lastly, you see that I've produced the final screenshot, the final build, where I've kind of got all four things going at once. I have produced a compelling, interesting experience for our users. So that's our first story. Let me go to a slightly different tangent now and talk about how do you do this? Is this magic? Do I need to hire a bunch of elves and they toil away in the background until this works, or can mere mortals produce applications like this? So I've simplified GSA, Google Search, Enterprise Search implementations into four critical pillars: content acquisition, security, user interface, and analytics. And I've just got a brief slide on each one. I'll just sort of introduce you to what's involved in the four pillars of actually implementing one of these, so you can go back to your company and say, I have some idea of how this works, and I can connect the dots and see what it would take for us to do something like this. So the first one is content acquisition. Google Search Appliance isn't going to do us much good if we don't load it with content that I can search. And I've just briefly described roughly the 2 or 4 ways, depending on how you look at it, that content can get into a Google Search Appliance. The 2 ways are web crawling and XML feeds. We are all, I hope, all familiar with how Google spiders the web. Google for years has been going out and hitting a web page, following all the links on that web page to other web pages, and it does that forever. Google's indexing trillions of pages this way. The Google Search Appliance has exactly the same type of web crawler built in, and if I have web-based content, I can point it at the page and it will index it all. But you may not be aware that the GSA has a whole other side. I can push content into it from my content management system, my databases, my XML stores, whatever I've got. That's the right-hand side here. This is the ability to push content and metadata in. I can even build things called connectors that automate the process, that add some bells and whistles to it. But the bottom line is, if my application cannot be web crawled, I can build a connector and push it in through an XML feed. On the left-hand side, you may notice one that I skipped over, which are called adapters. Adapters is a new methodology from Google that allows me to use the web crawler to web crawl things that were not necessarily web crawlable. It's kind of a mouthful, but the idea is that I can essentially webify an application that wasn't very easy for the Google appliance to web crawl, and I can make it easy for it to web crawl. The nice thing is I still get to use all of the conventions of the web crawler, like spidering and checking periodically to see if anything has changed and removing pages that no longer exist. But I can do that for databases or content management systems. So it's kind of a special form of web crawling, just like connectors are a special form of XML feeds. So there's your 30,000-foot view of the various ways to get content into my Google Search Appliance. So briefly talk about security. Why do I even care about this? This is very different than Google.com. Google.com shows everybody the same results, hypothetically. Enterprise search is very different. Enterprise search, we have an assumption that it will only show me things that I'm allowed to see. And you may think, how on earth does it do that? Well, this slide gives a little bit complicated, but I'll step through it methodically here real quick. Explanation of how the GSA does this. There are two fundamental steps. They're in the big, bold, black words at the top: authentication and authorization. The first step is the GSA has to know who I am, who is running the search. Anytime we're indexing highly sensitive, secure content that not everyone should be allowed to see, we enable this on the Google Search Appliance. The GSA goes through a process of determining who the user is and what they are. Every application can have the concept of roles or groups or membership in different organizational units, and that can control what I see. We may protect content. I've shown a simple example here where I have logged in and I am a member of various Active Directory groups. I'm in the engineering group, I'm in the users group, and the wiki admins group, and the domain users group. That likely will grant me access to certain repositories because I'm a member of those groups. So it's very important for the Google Search Appliance to know not just who I am, but what I am. The second step, authorization. This is the trimming of the results. As our content is indexed, we provide, those connectors provide, those adapters provide, those XML feeds provide the Google Search Appliance with the description of who can see this document. It's literally a list of users or groups or roles dictating who can see it. And you'll see the little arrow at the bottom with the green check mark. There's a match. I'm in the engineering group, and this document can be viewed by anyone who's in the engineering group. So I get to see the search result. If you weren't in any of those groups or you were not one of those users, you literally would not see it in your search results. It's as if it doesn't exist. So that's the 2-minute version of security with the Google Search Appliance. I'm going to briefly cover the last two. They're a little more ethereal, but I'll give you the idea. The third pillar of an implementation has got to be the user interface. I now have content. I have it securely protected. But what's it going to look like? That's what everybody wants. That's what everyone cares about. And I just want to briefly show you there's a lot of different ways to present information in our Google search applications. On the left, I've got a very beautiful search application with graphs and facets and bar charts and detailed information about each search result, and a lot of different filters and widgets that I can use to control what I see. We build those types of applications on top of the Google Search Appliance. There are toolkits that let us create these rapidly. The middle, an iPhone, a mobile application. I just want to show that we're not limited to a single presentation for search results. I can even go so far as to get the raw XML out of the Google Search Appliance and build an entirely custom experience by hand. there are almost infinite possibilities with what we can do with the user interface after I run the search. And this is one that people forget, the fourth pillar. This is sort of post-launch. People forget to go back and look at how it's doing. So I just want to point out briefly that analytics is a critical part of our GSA implementations. We want to look for establishing baselines so that you can go tell your boss, we went up 20 points in something or other because we did this. We help you establish those baselines and measure the effectiveness and the quality of your search results. And we can suggest appropriate countermeasures if you're not happy with them. We can suggest things to improve the relevancy and to improve the results and to react to things that are actually happening in your implementation, seasonal trends, trends within a certain audience. Maybe we saw an example last week where some dress code policy within the company was being searched for very frequently, but people were having to paginate very deep into the results to find it, and we were able to figure out why and get the current 2015 dress code policy for the company surfacing at the top of the results. So those are the types of things we work with our customers after the launch. And then we help them automate the testing so that they can repeat this process frequently and search doesn't become stagnant. I think that's maybe the most important thing I've said all day is we like to keep these searches, somebody referred to it as keeping them evergreen. Search should not be something that we do once with our customers and walk away. There should be a methodology for keeping it current, and therefore your users will realize that and they will keep coming back and using it because it hasn't gone stale. So that's my brief 4 pillars on enterprise search, and I think at this point we're going to open it up to some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chad. So just want to remind everybody that you can ask your questions via the chat feature. We'll try to answer as many as we can within the time frame we have. Several questions were already asked throughout, so we'll go ahead and just get started in the meantime. And Chad and Rob, just feel free to follow along the questions tab. So the first question is, what is the best way to deploy enterprise search, departmentally or as an enterprise, or all at once?
Sure. The old big bang approach versus one at a time. Why don't you start, Rob?
That's right. Why don't I do it? I think if you think about the value map that I showed, you probably would guess that our position is to start, and I wouldn't suggest that it's departmentally. I would suggest that it's by workflow or by groups of people, right? Start with a group of people who are struggling with information retrieval, or whose, if we can impact their productivity, it has a remarkable impact on the business. These people often look like researchers or folks who are highly paid individual contributors. Those are generally the place where you'd start, and then look at the workflows that they do, and figure out workflows that can make a difference. Chad, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, briefly. Within each of those workflows, try to be exhaustive. If you have gaps in a workflow, like let's say a workflow involves searching 3 different repositories and you only get to 2 out of the 3, you may actually introduce more confusion than you've helped because they can't figure out if they're not finding what they need because it wasn't included in this release or because they're searching for the wrong thing. So try to tie a bow on a workflow before you move on to something else.
Great, thank you. So this next one is a 2-part question. How can you measure the quality of an enterprise search solution, and how do you know if you're getting a good return on your investment? And what can you do if you aren't seeing the results you expected?
Okay, I'll start with that one, Rob. I mentioned briefly the idea of baselining. I do think that to do any of this, you need to at least know where you are, and this involves a little bit of manual work. The Search Appliance isn't going to tell you that your search results are good, or your search results are yellow, or they're red or green. It's not going to tell you that. You have to do a little bit of baselining to set expectations and then to measure it. So go through your top 50 queries and have a whiteboarding exercise where you all jot down what you think should be, doesn't necessarily have to be the top result, but a top result for those queries. And then run through your top 50 queries. You can script it and do it automatically and, get a number, 1.7. I don't know what 1.7 is, but it's some average of how close to the top are we in general for what we think should be the top result. The point is at the baseline. Now, as you implement new solutions, as you tune, as time goes on, you can remeasure. If you go to a 1.6, fabulous, you went up. If you drop to a 2.2, you went down. It's relative, but it's absolutely important to establish a baseline. The second thing is, how do you know if you're getting a return on investment? Well, I have to ask, what was the point of implementing enterprise search? If you sell widgets and the point was to sell more widgets, then you need some way to correlate searches with the sale of widgets. This often involves looking at two sets of logs, looking at your search logs or the fact that someone ran a search and correlating it all the way through to the end when someone completes a transaction of buying a widget. If it's within a workflow within R&D, it may be that it's a longer arc. It may be that over the next 6 months or a year, we show a tangible increase in the speed to bringing things to market that you can attribute to being able, you spent less time searching. Because of those longer story arcs, we tend to end up capturing that through surveys, feedback from the users, periodically polling users to see, ask how much of your day, what percentage of your day do you think you spend hunting for documents? And then, it's a bit anecdotal, but over an average of all your employees and measuring that every quarter, you can start to see a decrease in how much time people are spending searching and how satisfied they say they are.
Precisely right. And I will add, on the ROI side, Chad gave a great example of how you actually go measure it. And the key to actually being able to measure any sort of ROI is as you go in up front, you know what you're looking for. So go in with a plan, have picked the workflows, be projecting what you think is going to happen to those workflows, be projecting where you think you're going to get the return before you begin the project. Because if it's all thrust in sort of no vector, it becomes very hard to measure ROI after the fact.
Great, thank you. Next question. What part do connectors play in the deployment of Google Search for Work?
I'm guessing this came from the fact that I mentioned connectors and content acquisition. It's a big buzzword. People often think that search requires a lot of connectors, and it is true that when you buy any search tool, you're likely going to want to search content from a bunch of different applications, not all of which, probably none of which, were developed by the same people that made the search tool. That's kind of the environment we're in, where we have these agnostic search engines in kind of a hub and spoke, and all of the spokes are Jive, Jira, Confluence, SharePoint. It's an alphabet soup of content sources, and so it does become a bit of an alphabet soup of connectors. I'll allay people's fears that the more connectors you work with, someone like me, who work with dozens and dozens, they become a bit formulaic. There's a finite number of types of connectors because there's a finite number of ways that applications are designed and the types of APIs they have for letting you index their content. Now, certainly there are applications that play nicer than others. Some keep their content a little close to the vest and make it difficult for us to index all of their content and all their security and all their metadata. But you'll find that having a way to index databases, having a way to index XML, having a way to index things like RESTful web services, having a handful of those in your toolkit, that's sort of your screwdriver and your hammer and your saw. Those are fundamentals that every tradesman has in their toolbox. We're the same way. We come into projects with a toolbox full of connectors that even if we don't have exactly the one that the customer needs, we have one that will be a really good starting point and gets us halfway down the road before we start. So connectors, it's a big deal. I get it. There's a lot of anxiety about them when we start projects, but it doesn't actually tend to be a huge roadblock for us.
Great, thank you. So we have time for one more question. Is the health, pharma, bio, and medical device vertical still requiring data to stay behind the firewall, or will a cloud architecture eventually permeate the solution requirements?
Mr. Cox, I'm going to...
So, yeah, I think, is it requiring it? So from a regulatory perspective, that is, from a regulatory perspective, I'm not aware that there's a requirement for cloud. As we practically work with clients, a lot of what we hear is they are uncomfortable with something that's out in the cloud that is then punching a hole through their firewall and crawling all of their contents and dragging it back out into the cloud. So part of the reason we have a go-to-market today that is an appliance-based that actually sits on premises at a client site is that they control the index, they control the physical hardware, and it doesn't phone home. Over time, I see that going to cloud. I see there being a lot of things from a machine learning and physical perspective that we expect to take advantage of over time. But today, the great majority of our biotech, pharma, et cetera, customers want to have things kept on premises.
Perfect, thank you. So it looks like we've used up the allotted time we have for the webinar, so that'll end the Q&A portion. If you do have questions, feel free to contact us via the contact forms on the website. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and it'll be sent to you in just a few days, along with a link to the slides that you can share with your colleagues. We have a webinar that's coming up, which will be on Siebel Clinical Trial Management System Best Practices. Feel free to register for that webinar. The link will be in the slides, or you can just go onto our website and get there that way. We would like to thank you very much for your participation and hope that the information Chad and Rob provided today was helpful. We look forward to having you join our next webinar. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Rob.